Tommy Robinson's case was heard in the Royal Court of Justice earlier today in London. His lawyers are challenging Keir Starmer's government and the governor of the prison in Woodhill for the torture treatment of Tommy, and the drama across the whole day will be discussed. Good afternoon, Britannia, and hello to the rest of the world. Welcome to 2CTV, your global news channel. I'm Maya Tusi, and this is your latest news update from Britannia. And of course, the shambolic situation with this government and the Woodhill prison when it comes to Tommy Robinson. As you can tell, I'm not actually in my home studio in London. We're out of London. I had to actually come to deal with family. Yes, family time, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, we couldn't be in the Royal Court of Justice today, but we've had a number of good friends who were there, including obviously Ezra Levant of Rebel News, Dan Wootton as well from the Dan Wootton channel, and a few others, Voice of Wales and others. We have some updates. So for those who have missed this whole saga, the reason that the Royal Court of Justice was busy today was because of everything that the governor of the prison, Woodhill, and the government of Keir Starmer have been denying until now. The mistreatment of Tommy Robinson as a civil offender. Not only they're treating him like a criminal convict, but actually they're treating him like he's a terrorist, like he's an extremist, or he's a dangerous figure. And what we have actually had is everything that we've been discussing on this channel over the last few months, in terms of his communication being cut off, in terms of his food situation, lack of exercise, visits being cancelled, many other issues. Solitary confinement, that's the main problem, obviously. And obviously we had recently a doctor to go and assess his mental health and physical health. Obviously the establishment didn't really care much. There was no reporting on the mainstream media. That's when we had the lawyers of Tommy challenging this in court. So Martin Chamberlain, the judge, essentially oversaw the whole thing, and we had Tom Cross, who was the government lawyer. Now, Tom Cross was a little bit, let's just say, irrational in court today. As I said, because I wasn't able to be there myself today, we had a number of other colleagues and friends who actually did manage to go from other new media outlets. So big shout out to all these lovely people, including obviously Rebel, Ezra, Dan Wootton, Voice of Wales, and many others. And we've already been getting a lot of updates. And again, big shout out will have to go to especially Ezra Levant, who came all the way from Canada-stan to London-stan to report this. And he's actually already on his way back to the airport. He's going to fly back at 6 p.m. Crazy guy. But so big shout out. So I'm going to basically steal his work. So I have to give credit to him because I wasn't able to be there. He and Dan Wootton actually discussed this, what actually happened in court. Let's go to them first. Then I'm going to give you my thoughts and get your reaction as well, because there's a few other things that actually happened during the...
Oh, that was dramatic. What just happened?
Dan, all morning, Tommy Robinson's lawyers and the government's lawyers have been sparring about his treatment in prison. And one of the things they're debating about is, does he get privileges like phone privileges, visitors? And there was some dispute. So there was a moment there when Tommy, who was joining by video link, waved to get the attention of the court to signal that the government lawyer wasn't accurately reporting the facts. So the judge said, okay, we're going to have a short break where Tommy can phone his lawyers to instruct them. Tommy wasn't going to give evidence directly, but he could say things to the lawyer. But in the middle of that phone call, the prison governor hung up the phone, canceled the call, and Tommy Robinson came back and wrote a piece of paper and held it up to the video link saying, I was cut off. And the judge said, is this true? And the Judge Martin Chamberlain said to the government's lawyer, Mr. Cross, you call that prison governor and you get that phone call going right now. And you tell the prison governor not to cut it off until Tommy and his lawyer are done talking. I mean, this judge is very even-keeled. It's tough to read this judge. But when the prison governor cut off Tommy's call, I think that irritated the judge because it delayed things. And here's the reason I think that's an important moment, Dan. It sort of proved that the prison was taking liberties, that the prison was cutting corners, that when the prison says Tommy has certain privileges, well, maybe or maybe not. Of all the things said this morning, I mean, I think Alistair Williamson, the lawyer for Tommy, he's an excellent King's Counsel. I love listening to him myself. But I think perhaps the most persuasive moment was for the judge to witness firsthand the whimsical, capricious, and perhaps even abusive nature of the prison. Amazing.
Well, especially because up until that point, the KC for the Secretary of State had been saying, Tommy gets contact all the time, there are people in there all the time. He couldn't even get the attention of a prison guard during the trial. And that second note he held up actually made the point that all his calls are monitored and that they would have been monitoring that call with his lawyers.
That's the thing. We're going to go back to the rest of that, by the way. The most dramatic moment was when you have the prison, the actual Woodhill prison, and essentially from using the command of the governor, Nicola Marfleet, cutting the video feed of Tommy because they knew the truth was coming out, because they knew that Tom Cross, the government lawyer, was lying. Essentially, if you missed the whole thing, because Ezra was obviously live tweeting the whole thing, Tom Cross, as a government lawyer, was basically gaslighting the public, gaslighting the judge, the whole court, and saying, I don't know what you guys are talking about, Tommy's been treated well, and he's happy, and Tommy's like, no, I'm not, and then they don't want that to be shown. And one of the main areas that has to be discussed is the role of Nicola Marfleet, who's the governor, and any possible role that comes from the central government directly or indirectly. So we're talking about the Ministry of Justice. We are talking about the Secretary of Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, and of course her colleagues, because things seem to be getting worse under this Labour government. If we go back to Dan and Ezra, they also cover everything else that happened afterwards.
Have been monitoring that call with his lawyers.
Very interesting, and I believe that. Other things that the Secretary of State, that's the government's lawyer, was saying, I know from personal experience are not true. I know you visited Tommy, and I visited Tommy once, but my subsequent visits, one of them was approved, and then at the last minute was cut off by the prison. So is that what the Secretary of State, what the government means by Tommy has visiting privileges? For a while there, Tommy's own son was cut off from phone privileges. There's a lot of liberties being taken, and there's a certain cruelty there. And listen, Tommy's been in solitary for about 150 days. It's not meant to be that way, Dan.
That's the key point. I mean, one thing is about the treatment until now. One thing is about, as we said, the phone call being cut off between him and his lawyers. That's disgusting. One thing is about the fact that the challenge itself would have been unnecessary if the governor and the prison were being normal. Now, one thing is about monitoring any sort of communication that Tommy had with anybody. That's again, the main reason they've been doing that is because they wanted to put pressure. It's essentially to psychologically torture you, saying that we are watching every move. Not that they were, stopping Tommy from doing anything sensitive. I mean, considering that a phone call between him and his lawyers could get cut off, that's on a whole new level of chaos because they didn't want the truth to come out. Anyway, going back to these guys, obviously they covered all the other issues as well.
Psychological evaluation by a mental health professional sent in to examine Tommy, and talking about his PTSD, his ADHD, how some of it is from his last stay in solitary confinement, how that is affecting Tommy's mindset. I won't try and repeat exactly what the doctor said, but it was pretty persuasive. And by the way, the government didn't dispute any of that psychologist's findings. So you know what? If I had to guess, it's foolish for me to guess because we're going to find out the result in about an hour. But I think this judge is going to say, you know what? Let's have that hearing sooner rather than later. He's not going to make a final disposition about what happens in the hearing, but I bet he goes for a quick hearing. One last detail. I tried to Google a little bit about this judge. I hadn't heard of him before today. His name is Martin Chamberlain. Senior guy, obviously pretty smart guy, from Edinburgh originally, if I'm not mistaken. He gave an interview with the Times of London a few years back, sort of up-and-coming lawyer. They wanted to ask him a question. They said, if you could pass one law, what would it be? And you know what he said? He said we should have stronger freedom of speech in the UK. We should have a US-style First Amendment.
Wow.
And
not usual, by the way.
Yeah,
for
I
the
know.
judiciary here in the UK.
And so some of that has to do with Tommy's case, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, he also weighed in favor of the what's that called? Existence Rebellion, or what's that group called again?
Extinction Rebellion.
That's right. So they're sort of eco-extremists, and you and I might not agree with them. But if this judge is strengthening their right to protest, again, if he's being a principled precedent follower, if he applies that matrix to Tommy, well, maybe he's more sympathetic. If he's a free speecher and a political protest supporter, maybe he's more sympathetic to Tommy. I don't know. You don't want to read too much into it because he is guided by the facts and the law. But the things I could divine about him just by a quick Google, I thought, this isn't a bad judge.
So once again, big shout out to Ezra Levant, who came all the way from Canada. So I had to steal his work because I couldn't be there. But Dan Wootton as well. Let's not forget, Ezra has been loyal and a good friend for a very long time to Tommy. And that's, again, massive credit. But Dan Wootton, someone who people could have said, oh, all he has to do is just grovel back and go back to the mainstream media. He's still got friends there. He's completely now burned all those bridges because he knows he doesn't need the mainstream media anymore. So he's actually being independent and he's doing what is right. So he decided to go there, even though he's now got a target on his back for being in that courtroom, in the gallery. But he did it. So also massive thank you to Dan Wootton. What we were supposed to be getting today after the trial was a verdict, the actual decision, judgment by the judge. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. He has said, Chamberlain, that he's going to go to consider all options and he is going to be communicating that electronically tomorrow. And a lot of people were saying that this is simply because the whole thing got complicated and he wants to make sure that there's a fair judgment. Some people were saying outside the court that they didn't want to cause mayhem outside the actual building. But I don't think it's that, because we've already had a number of decisions being announced, the verdicts, when Tommy Robinson's supporters and journalists are outside the building, and everybody behaved. So we will have to wait till tomorrow to find out what is actually going on and whether the governor of the prison, Nicola Marfleet, will actually be facing justice for her vicious attacks on Tommy and lying to the public and gaslighting everybody by saying that, I don't know what you guys are talking about. We have the best prison. It's basically paradise. So all that will be revealed tomorrow. Let's get some reaction from you lovely people. First super chat, thank you, saying Nicola Marfleet, by cutting the phone off to Tommy and his KC, effectively has committed contempt of court, as they could have swayed the judge's decision. Keir, the traitor Starmer, should be joining her in prison. So, technical difficulties, guys. It's complete nonsense, obviously. They are trying anything that they have, because they knew that Tommy's lawyers are good, and they were obviously going to be challenging all this, and they have the facts, including the letters that have been sent to friends of Tommy and families and family and relatives who wanted to visit him, and they cancelled those visits. We have all the evidence. Leslie says that governor should be removed from that position. What I'm interested to find out, and I don't know whether we can find out until obviously this whole thing is over, I would like to hear from those who had any dealings with Nicola. Maybe those who used to be in the Woodhill prison before. Maybe those who know her. I would like to know her track record. I would like to know about her past in terms of her career. Because all we know so far is about the last few months as the person in charge of the Woodhill prison, the same place that has been torturing one civil offender. It will be interesting to see if anybody will come forward. So she says the judge should order the prison governor to attend the court in person and explain themselves. I think that should be one of the main things. But the problem is, using certain people as witnesses is one thing, because obviously the battle is between the government lawyer and Tommy's lawyers. So it's not necessarily directly the governor's lawyers. I mean, it's the same thing, but it's not really. And Nicola Marfley, it will simply be a witness. And, somebody needs... I mean, if it's proven that she's complicit in certain decisions on purpose, biased decisions, well, somebody needs to sue her, if that is the case. If evidence comes out properly, that directly came from her. I mean, she's in charge. Sounding the alarm, one day Starmer will regret how he treats people. The injustice of it all. The Lord repays. I agree. And Mark says, the British government would rather put Tommy in prison than deport all the Muslim rapists there who rape young English girls. Yeah, it's a lot easier to bring down one boogeyman, right? Desmond says, a big shout out for our birthday girl, Jojo. Oh, it's Jojo's birthday, one of our regular 2CTV viewers. Happy birthday, Jojo. I hope you're having a good day. I'll get some of the... If Jojo is in the comment section, I'll have a look to see if she's in live chat. Sorry. Bond says, I understand why they are keeping him in solitary confinement for his safety. But the punishment doesn't fit the crime. Put him under house arrest with an ankle monitor for the rest of the sentence. So that is the excuse that they're using, safety, right? But it's nonsense. As this person said, he's a civil offender. Put him in house arrest, fine him, put some sort of tag on him for a while, get him to the community service, that's it. I mean, if that is basically what we're dealing with. But they are treating him differently. The excuse that is simply for his own safety is nonsense. Because it's not really just about solitary confinement. It's everything else that's happening to him. You can be in solitary confinement, which, by the way, is still disgusting. But I'm just saying for the sake of the argument. Solitary confinement for the sake of safety, even though even the so-called international human rights will argue against it. But if you're going to be in your own section and unit, you're going to have been given, in fact, extra privileges compared to other actual criminal convicts in the main prison, because you are on your own. They're going to have to give him, or someone in this position, 2 visits a day, more access to the outside when it comes to exercise, fresh air, and things like that, and more communication. Simple. If we have to say, well, there is no other option, he has to be in solitary confinement, which again is still also a terrible excuse anyway. Now, Jojo, there's Jojo saying thank you everyone for the birthday wishes. Brilliant. All right, we have a couple of more super chats. We got Anthony saying, my respect goes to Dan Woodson for attending Tommy's hearing. That's the thing. I mean, essentially, for a lot of people who are not really in the mainstream spotlight would just say, well, go and support Tommy, right? Yeah, normal people can. I mean, even normal people could get into trouble. But there was a reason a lot of people were even scared to even be associated with Tommy. Dan Woodson is going to be in trouble, basically. But he doesn't care because he's independent-minded now. So he's not going to be invited on any sort of mainstream channel. Not that he wants to. But he's not going to be invited to Christmas dinners and by major political figures. But he knew the cost, and he did it because it was the right thing to do. And that is the key point. I hope the judge doesn't get advice from Starmer. Well, I mean, I would love to know Nicola's political leanings. I have a feeling she's not a conservative. I don't know, she might be. Probably not. Andrew Harris says, it's going to be very interesting when Tommy is finally released from prison. I think this country will have its Nelson Mandela moment. Don't give him a big head. He's already got a big head. This is going to elevate him to heights so we've not seen in years. Well, relatively that's true in terms of even what's been going on with Tommy and his rebranding over the last couple of years. He's become more normalized anyway, and he's made an effort with that. Again, the fact that you have people like Dan Wootton going there, and many others as well. The reality is, when he comes out, and I did tell him the last time I saw him a couple of weeks ago, we discussed this. There has to be a plan, and he has to be organic. And I did give him advice. I said, okay, when you're out, we have to do a whole series of professionalizing the Tommy's operation, and not in a Zio Yusuf professionalizing Reform UK sort of thing. No, doesn't have to mean that Tommy has to sell out. But in terms of, there are more people than ever following him, respecting him from all around the world. I mean, the fact that not just Ezra and Rebel News, but Jordan Peterson had Tommy on his channel a couple of times. People in Canada, people in the US, many other people who didn't know him before, now they know him. And he's been given more platform by new independent media outlets. And he's been making a good argument, because a few years ago, all he had was, in terms of his uncensored version of his thoughts and his position, was the Oxford Union debate, the speech that he made, and the Q&A that he had. So people who chose to do their homework over the last few years, they watched that, they're like, actually, he makes sense. But if you were just listening to the BBC and the mainstream, then obviously he's the devil. So obviously he's not. So the fact that they still call him far right is fascinating, by the way, because we actually have the ethno-nationalists who hate Tommy because they say he's a traitor, he's a Zionist, he's a civic nationalist. That's a whole different argument. You never make everybody happy, right? Someone says, reform are finished. Wipe your backside on them, lad. Why would you say? All because of Nigel the Snake. Yeah, Zia professionalizing didn't help, did it? I mean, it's helping them. They're still doing well in the polls, but doing well in the polls is not the same as doing well in government. Boris Johnson did really well. He was popular. He was winning. What did Boris Johnson do? Not too well in government, did he? Skycat says exactly 2 seats gone, the opposite to what they wanted. I mean, yeah. Keir Starmer is going to be... I think I was going to say he's going to get into trouble for this, and Shabana Mahmood, but in reality, the mainstream media is not really going to be covering this. Like tomorrow, when the judgment comes out, I'm not really expecting the mainstream media to do any sort of discussion about what happened in court this week, today and tomorrow. So they're not going to get any sort of scrutiny, unless you get certain MPs, including Rupert Lowe, in the House of Commons, raising this as a question at some point next week, perhaps. Also, I just realized that you guys have given me a heads up there. This number is now outdated. When we started the live stream, we were on 784,000. Now we're on 785,000. It's gone down again. Why is it going down? It's like the Reform UK's membership ticker. It's gone up again. There we go. 785,000. Thank you so much, everybody, for all the support and your patience with me. Obviously, as I said, I'm not in London. That's why I couldn't be at the Royal Court of Justice, but we'll come back because today is a big day. It's all kicking off, not just in London with Tommy. It's kicking off in Turkey with the Turkish people against Erdogan, but also it's kicking off in Iran, a massive uprising by the Iranian people on the day of Persian New Year. It's Persian New Year today, and they are celebrating, and of course they are rising up against the Islamic occupation. We're going to bring you guys all that update. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maya Tusi, and we are the media.